Tonight, we're giving you 6 great ideas that you can easily do yourself to improve your property's resale value, as well as enhance the lifestyle at home. My guest, Matt, goes by Matt the Fixer, and he inspires and shows millions of homeowners and do-it-yourselfers how to save lots of money on renovations, doing it themselves. His YouTube channel, The Fixer, has almost 250,000 subscribers, and some of his videos have 7, 8, 9 million views, and you're about to know why. And so I'm Todd Sachs. I'm the broker and founder here at Sachs Realty. We are a Maryland real estate brokerage that helps both residential and commercial clients, sellers, buyers, tenants, and landlords with their transaction. But guys, if you're anywhere else in the United States and you don't have an agent, I have an amazing broker network all over the country. Just hit me up. All of my contact information is below, as is Matt the Fixer. And guys, without further ado, Matt, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Todd. Good to be here. I really appreciate it.
So tell everybody a little bit about you, man. Where does your inspiration come from?
Sure. My inspiration started with basically buying my first fixer-upper and trying to save money. And luckily, I had experience in construction. I worked, in a construction company for about 12 years and learned a lot, and figured I have all this knowledge, and I've always loved helping people, my friends and everything, with the knowledge that I have. And I've always been into video, and I've always loved YouTube. And I figured, put that stuff together, help some people, and see how it goes. And I've been really lucky to get to the point where I'm at right now. And I love it. I love helping people, and I love making videos.
Yeah, well, tonight we're going to talk about 6 great ways that you can enhance your home. And so before we dive in, though, tell everybody, I know you were, and I've been a contractor for over 30 years, and really started out swinging a hammer and know a lot of different things about a lot of different things. And,
Yeah.
You kind of need that, right?
Yeah.
You can either become a framing contractor where you go to work every single day and you learn framing. But when you become more of a generalist, like you and I are really through years of experience, you kind of learn how to do so many different things, at least general knowledge on it. So kind of talk about, when you were working for that general contractor, and what were some of the things that you worked on?
Sure. So when I started in my early 20s, and I just needed a job. And a friend of my brother's just went out on his own with a construction company. So he needed a laborer, somebody to lug 2x4s around. I didn't know anything about construction when I started. I couldn't even read a tape measure. So the fact that this guy brought me on and was like, okay, let's give it a shot, was awesome. Because he was like the guru. He taught me everything I know. And I took a liking to it, and I think I became pretty good at it. And we did everything from small handyman type stuff to house flips. Towards the end of that, we had an investor that would buy a house, and we would do all the work, like everything, frame to finish. So I had my hands in a lot, pretty much everything construction wise. So yeah, that's basically the story. And I moved on from that job and got another job as a video producer, my other love. And now I've kind of combined those two, and that's me. That's the Fixer.
Well, a lot of people, HGTV's hit primetime television, and it's been that way for, a decade or more. Yeah. And, a lot of times what I like about your videos is that, you're not seeing the actors, the host of the show, and then you're, a little glimpse behind exactly what's going on. You're seeing everything about what's going on, what you're uncovering. And a lot of people, I think, as they turn to YouTube to make repairs to many different things or learn how to do just about anything. I mean, not that long ago, I fixed my washing machine, through a YouTube video, and I bought the parts online, and my wife and I literally fixed our washing machine and saved probably $400 or $500, I would imagine.
Yeah.
You're showing, kind of start to finish. What advice? I mean, people are buying. I mean, they're buying a lot of houses, especially now, where they've just been saying yes to a house that needs repairs because the competition's been so heavy for these buyers with the as is, situation that we've experienced. What kind of advice can you give to people before we dive in that kind of mentally prepares someone for doing a home improvement project?
Yeah. So whenever you buy a house, and this is all just my opinion, you have to be prepared to either do some repairs yourself or pay somebody to do repairs. Because there's no magic house that lasts forever. I don't care if it's built out of concrete, metal, whatever, things deteriorate. And you have to be prepared going into that you're going to have to fix it up. I mean, you could live there forever and just let it fall apart around you, but then you put yourself in a place that isn't good towards the end of the lifespan of that house. So you really need to be ready to fix it.
We see a lot of times, it's funny you say that the house kind of deteriorates around them. As a real estate company, we see a lot of times with sellers will go in and they're kind of oblivious to what's wrong. They've been living in it for so long, broken. And then when we tell them they have to fix it, they're like, well, I've been living over 25 years and I haven't fixed it. So, but when they do, they say, wow, I wish I would have fixed it 10 years ago. And I also know that there's a lot of pride in doing the projects yourself. And, I, being a contractor, you may think that my house is flawless. It's not, the old, shoemaker's son kind of thing, walks around with holes in their shoes. Yeah. My favorite phrase has been, yeah, well, this project will be finished in about 2 weeks. And of course, you know how that is. Yeah. But there is an amount of pride that comes with learning how to do something and fixing it yourself. And in fact, my wife always knows when I fix something or finish something because I boast about it. And so do my friends, anybody that comes over, I'm bragging about, hey, check out what I just did. So, yeah. But when you do have an older home or when you get into projects, they always seem to be a little bit or a lot more than what you expected. So tonight we're hoping that we can kind of give some people, guys, if you're thinking about some home improvements, you may want to take out a pad of paper and a pen and just start writing down some of these notes that Matt and myself are going to kind of give you, because these are going to be things that as you get into things or even before you start that you may not consider. So we're hoping that we give you some good nuggets. And Matt, just kind of, tell everybody, what are some of the oh-nos or uh-ohs, as people are getting into various projects around the house, what are some of the things that people uncover the most?
Yeah. So going back to your point of, people letting stuff go, not everybody has the knowledge that I have or you have. And that's totally fine. You're a computer programmer or something. That's what like I couldn't program anything. But if you dive into it and you try to learn that, I think anybody can do their own home repairs. And if you go into it carefully, you're never going to know exactly what you're going to find. But some of the things can be, old wiring that could be live in the wall. When I tore apart my living room, I tore out the center wall and there was a switch there and there must have been a kitchen fan on the side of the house. And when I tore the wall out and started looking at all the wiring and everything, I had this little rolled up wire just cut in the old fan hole. And there was like birds' nests and all this dry material. And I noticed when I flipped the switch for the attic, I went over and tested that line. That was live. So that was coming on every time I flipped the switch for the attic, which that kind of stuff is a little scary. But that's why I go so deep into the repairs, because I want to get all of that stuff out of there. Any of the old, they cut a wire and just tucked it in the wall. You can find live wires. One big fear of a lot of homeowners is asbestos. And it's a legitimate fear because, I think before 1982, asbestos was used in a lot of building materials, a lot of old tile floors, rolled vinyl, notorious for old heating pipes and stuff like that. If you see the white around old heat pipes, that's, you should get that tested before you do anything. And then you'll probably have to hire somebody to take that out if, depending on if it tests positive. But those are like the big scary things. The other things are, you might just have to spend a little more time on the project. Oh, I have to replace this 2x4 because it is rotted, or rot is another thing, especially when you're doing outside repairs. If you replace a door, you're going to have to typically replace, the floor where it's at because water got in there. And that kind of stuff takes up more time. You might have to run to the store a couple times and that kind of thing. That's what I would say for, most repairs.
I remember when I took out my dining room wall, the outside wall, we had, I was pulling the molding off, and as I was pulling it off, I said, wow, this is really coming off easy. Like, you could just pull it off with your hands. Mm-hmm. And so, I did a little test hole, and the 2x4 was gone. And, so I started taking more off. The entire wall on the outside for the dining room was completely termite, destroyed.
Yeah.
So you could literally just take the 2x4s out. I mean, it was dust in your hands and just kind of pull them out. And I'll tell you, it's something else. One of the first renovations that I did for flipping, my first flip, I did down in Baltimore City and in a place called Hamden. And we took the walls out because we were doing some things that we're going to talk about tonight, opening walls up, things like that. And this was a balloon framed house, right? And when we took the plaster off, we found pictures that were actually tacked to the outside sheathing. The house had zero insulation. And when they plastered the walls, they just literally encapsulated everything that was, there were a lot of things in there, pictures, old bottles, wow, some coins, things like that. So it was kind of cool. Unfortunately,
yeah, that's cool to find.
Yeah, nothing worth any money, really.
Yeah.
But so let's dive right in. So 6 ideas. We're going to start with painting. And I want to just say, as an agent, a real estate agent, I can't tell you how many times I've showed houses, not so much lately because things are selling like crazy, where people walk in and they go, no, we can turn around. There's the walls, pink walls, turquoise, whatever. It's paint, guys, right? So, but a lot of people don't have imaginations. I had somebody not too long ago say, I would never buy that house because of the amount of wallpaper. Again, guys, this is wallpaper, right? If other things, you have to have more of imagination than that when you're getting into this stuff. So, but Matt, let's talk about, you say it's amazing what little paint, can do. And so you say it as well. People have no imagination. So let's talk about painting. Why is that such a easy thing and a great thing to do for return on your investment?
Sure. I mean, I don't care who you are, anybody can paint. So professional painters out there, I'm not saying anything bad about you, but you can put paint on a wall. And like you're saying, if you go into a house and there's pink walls as soon as you walk in, that does turn people off. And the imagination thing, it's like they're walking in and there's a big, brick wall there that they just want to turn around and run. But just freshening up, even new coat of paint, you'd be very surprised what it would do. And like trim, old paint chipping off of the trim around the windows and the baseboards and stuff. You put some new white paint on there and you would be really surprised.
So what types of colors do you recommend? So, if you're talking about, wanting to brighten up or make you feel better about living in the house, I mean, what are some of the colors that kind of do that?
I think bright colors, neutral colors. Gray is what a lot of people like right now, like a light gray. Although I have had a lot of people knock on my my color choices, but it needs to be neutral. You can't, do a bright green and expect everybody to like that, so you just got to be careful when it comes to that. Neutral, earth tones, greens and browns and that kind of thing, I would recommend.
You recommend people like deferring to any kind of design centers or, how putting those different colors together? I mean, a lot of people just aren't good at it.
Yeah. So when it comes to your own house, if you come into a house and you can see past the pink walls and you can say to yourself, oh, this would look good if it had this, that's when you can go ahead and design it whichever way you want. You're going to stay there for a while, go crazy with paint, because you can always paint over paint, right? So go crazy with the design if you want, do your lines, do your fancy stuff. But when it comes to if you're trying to sell your house or increase the value, I recommend neutral colors for sure.
What's your opinion on ceiling white?
Ceiling white, I love it. Flat ceiling white. That's all I do. I don't think a ceiling should be a showpiece.
A lot of people will paint it the same color of the walls.
Yeah, I don't like that.
No, I agree.
That's my personal opinion.
Yeah. Kind of makes you feel more boxed in too, especially if you have an 8-foot ceiling. It kind of makes the space smaller. I think it's just something, about making it that flat white that just kind of makes it look higher.
Yep. Bright colors always seem to make a room look bigger.
So how about prep work, things like that? I mean, what should people start to do? First, should they paint the molding first? Should they do the walls first, the ceiling first? I mean, what's kind of like the proper steps that somebody should take?
So for me, I always, if there's any paint there that's chipping off, scrape that down, caulk in all the trims. If there's trim pieces that need to be replaced, you might have to do that, or you could, fill them with some kind of spackle, or Bondo even works good for woodworking. I know it's for cars, but I've used it before. There's some stuff called MH Ready Patch that I like to use that works good for trim. So just make it look nice, caulk everything in, and then if you know that you're going to make a mess, definitely put down drop cloths, and you can use painter's tape. I actually don't use painter's tape. I have a thing about painter's tape where it seems like every time I try to use it, I'll tape something off and then I'll paint it, and I'll go to take the paint off and it'll rip the paint off. So I've had bad experiences with painter's tape, so I don't use it. Just try and have a steady hand. It might take me a little longer to cut things in. But then you can, paint the walls after you prep. And then I like to cut in the trim last with trim paint.
So is there a big difference? I mean, when you're caulking, and certainly a part of the prep, should people go ahead and spend the money? I mean, is it worth a couple extra dollars per tube I mean, it's one of those things where, the heat comes on and it can shrink them. I mean, do you always recommend going with the better caulk?
I haven't seen a difference really between the expensive stuff and the cheap stuff when it comes to that kind of caulking. Maybe with silicone or something like that, I go with the good stuff.
Yeah, I guess it's more important when it's new because your wood will have a tendency to shrink and pull away from the walls. So maybe, that is a little bit more critical in the, buying the better grade. But one tip is make sure you have painter's caulk because not all caulk is paintable. So you don't want to go ahead and caulk everything up and then realize that your paint won't stick to it.
I've made that mistake before.
So have I.
I did some, I think I did some trim on a exterior door and I used silicone and I was like, why can I not paint this? I came back like 3 different days. This was, I was pretty young, but I'd paint it and then it would just wash right away. So yeah, definitely make sure it's paintable.
What do you think about white trim doors? I mean, if you're going to, paint your trim a different color, should they go lighter, darker? I mean,
I'm a huge fan of the traditional white trim. I have seen, especially on like the outside of houses, doing the trim around the windows and the door, all a matching color. And sometimes it matches to the roof or the shutters or something like that. And sometimes it looks good. And I guess that's another opinion. If you do it on the outside, just remember a lot more people are going to see it. But if it's your house and you like it, you go for it.
Should you do eggshell on the walls or flat? I know flat shows less imperfections, but, and as a builder, we will do that, because your eye doesn't see the imperfections. When your house is full of furniture and you put things on the wall, I mean, there are going to be imperfections in drywall and things like that, even when it's brand new. So I think builders have a tendency to use a flat, but what do you recommend for somebody that's actually living in the house?
I use eggshell. I agree. Flat does hide everything. I do flat on the ceilings always. I do eggshell because if you get like a scuff or, your kids throwing spaghetti all over the place, you can clean that a little easier than a flat. Flat tends to be harder to clean. So like you said, you can deal with the imperfections. Like nothing's going to be perfect. But I like eggshell on the walls and I like high gloss on the trim or semi-gloss.
How about in bathrooms? Do you use
bathrooms?
Semi-gloss or what do you...
A semi-gloss is a good idea on the walls for like moisture. It won't soak in as much because if you do the walls flat, that's kind of asking for trouble. And definitely recommend using like blue board or sorry, not blue board, but the moisture board, the purple stuff, if you're going to replace drywall in there. Bathrooms are a whole different thing with, moisture. It can get sketchy. So you just got to be careful.
And, and I said the last was the last, but I do have one last thing. What about the quality of paint? Because there is such a vast difference in paint quality. And I have to tell you, I just painted a room in my house not that long ago, and I thought I was using a decent paint. Man, I cannot get the roller lines. If you look at the ceiling, you can't see roller lines. But if you step back and the way the light comes in, even though it's a flat, you can see the roller lines. I mean, is there a way? Is that the quality that I'm using? I should have used a higher quality paint.
It could be that. It could be the technique maybe with having a certain amount of paint on the roller. Yeah, that's a tough thing. Paint lines, roller marks are a hard thing to avoid. But I'll be honest, I've tried a lot of different paints, and I love bare paints. The paint and primer combo, and I know there's people out there that don't like the paint and primer combo. In fact, I get a lot of comments about it. But it's a thick paint. And it goes on nice. It covers awesome. And yeah, I guess you just have to have the right amount of paint on the roller, not too much, not too little. And maybe avoid that. But when I first tried Bear, it was like watery, and like this was years ago, and now they've really stepped it up, and I love that stuff. I use it for almost everything.
Awesome. Good stuff. All right, we'll move right along. Flooring. Now, this is something I know a lot of people try themselves. There are a lot of different things that you have to consider when you're putting like a laminate floor down in your house. But, you know, you say if your hardwood floors are covered up by carpet, rip it up. So what are some of the, you know, things that people need to consider when they're doing flooring projects?
Sure. Yeah, I think it is really a sin. I don't know why people cover up hardwood floor with carpet. I get that it gets old, you know, it gets marked up, but sometimes that even looks better. You know, it has that weathered look, and I would always recommend ripping up carpet. So the thing to consider, though, once you do that, if you're okay with the way it looks, that's fine. Obviously, this is always there's opinions of, and if it's your house, I'm never going to tell you what to do with your own house. This is just a recommendation for if you're planning on selling it or you want to increase the value, you should refinish the hardwood floors, right? So that is a lot of work. I've done it myself on a handful of times, and I have a lot of respect for the people that refinish hardwood floors. So if you're willing to dive into that and do it yourself, you can definitely do your research, because there's right ways and wrong ways to do it. But if you want to hire somebody, I think it's well worth them coming in and, you know, spending $1,000 or whatever it is, $2,000 for them to sand it and stain it if you want, or just natural finish. I think it makes a huge difference if you have carpet covering your hardwood floors.
Yeah, you know, I've rented those sanders, those floor sanders where they have a little vacuum bag, and it doesn't matter. You're still going to get dust everywhere. I mean, it is going to show up in every nook and cranny of your house. And it is hard work. I mean, those guys and everybody that does home improvement work, I mean, it's, you know, it's work. I mean, there's no question about it. If you're doing it for a service, you know, thank God that you guys are available to homeowners. But yeah, I mean, certainly where you really, I guess, see the difficult areas are where that tack strip's put down. And a lot of times there's pet damage, you know, whether it's urine stains, things like that. But I do see what I hear a lot of times with people with hardwood floors is that they're noisy, you know. So, you know, if you have an older house and there's hardwood floors on the second floor, you know, someone carpeted it because maybe, you know, they had a reason for soundproofing, things like that. Or maybe they didn't like hardwood floors, but like Matt said, I mean, from a resale value, I mean, they're beautiful and you can always cover them up. So you could use scatter rugs and things like that help with flooring. In fact, a lot of apartments that have, you know, a laminate or hardwood floor, they actually, you know, will require the tenants to cover a certain amount of them because of the noise factor. But let's talk about some of the things that you need to consider if you're going to go over top of any type of flooring, whether it's hardwood or subflooring with laminate, because some of these products that are out there now are really amazing. I mean, they last for a long time. The early laminate products seem to not be so good, especially with water. But a lot of the vinyl, you know, laminates that are out there, they have the padding that's attached to them. It's a little bit more higher end product. But Matt, what should people be looking at or considering before they go to the store and buy, you know, 300 square feet or 500 square feet of flooring? What are some of the other things they need to consider when they're covering up?
Sure. So it depends on, you know, what your usage is. To tell you the truth, I did hardwood floors in my living room and my dining room, and I'm on the fence of whether I should have done that or gone with one of those really nice snap together floors because of my dog, because my floors are scratched up, and he's 100-pound mix and he's out of his mind. So he's really cool right now. He's quiet, but so yeah, some of these floors that they have now are like, you could drop a bowling ball on it and you have no marks. What you should keep in mind is if you have spots that are, if you have a really old house, if it's unlevel, you would have to consider, filling some of those spots, because this stuff, once you put it together, even though it has that padding, it's still, as you walk around it, it's going to move. You should have a relatively level floor, and then it comes down to the type that you want. I don't recommend stick tiles. I don't recommend stick tiles anywhere, really. I did them in my kitchen because we had this horrible 70s flower bright yellow design. So the first thing I did when I moved in here, I got stick tiles, threw it on top of that, and I've been happy with it. But they move around, over time. If they're not, I think they just do that, because any stick tile I've ever seen, they just separate and you have gaps, and then all the dirt gets in here, and I can even see the old floor through that. So I wouldn't recommend the stick tiles. I like the stuff that comes with the pads, probably the planks, I think 3 foot by like 8 inches or something like that. And they just snap together end to end, and then you snap the other side together. I love those floors, and they are really easy to put in. So once you consider, if your floor has these dips and stuff, you could, depending on what's there, like hardwood, it's hard for me to say to use filler there, because at one point maybe somebody will want to rip that up and refinish the floors. But if you want one of those floors and you want it to be nice and level and not move around like that, use the floor leveler, and make sure you check for square, so that at one wall you don't have a piece that is like this, and then you have to rip it to a piece that's like this, and the whole floor kind of looks shifted. So check for square, and you can either butt that floor up to the baseboard you have, and then some people run like a quarter round, which is just a little piece of trim that has this little, it's a quarter round piece. I like to rip up the trim that's there. I typically only do the quarter round if it's like the old pine boards, like the big, 8-inch, and they're thick. You might as well not mess with those. If they're newer boards, I rip them off, put it back on, or put new stuff on to cover that gap. So.
A lot of things that you want to consider too is, like you said, the type of flooring. I remember when I bought my first house and renovated the kitchen, I put down this really nice white ceramic tile. And I got to tell you, I mean, if you're going to do that, don't drop anything on it, because if you have any kind of, glassware, especially if you like it, if you drop it, and you will drop things on the floor, it shatters into a million pieces and glass goes everywhere, and it can be really difficult to clean up. Mm-hmm. And then, also kitchens, you're going to have water on the floor. So if you're doing those hardwood floors in your kitchen, you have to really pay attention and be careful. I can remember one time, our ice maker, we actually had a brand new refrigerator, and our ice maker just arbitrarily decided to dump ice out of it at like 11 o'clock at night, and, I was like, what the heck, man? I was like a 5-gallon bucket of, not that much, but it was a lot, of ice on the floor. So at 11 o'clock at night, I'm exhausted. I had to pull the refrigerator out, make sure that I cleaned up everything, because if I'd have just went to bed, we had hardwood floors at this point, they would have been destroyed, and water damage. Water is the enemy to hardwood floors. So, what about doors, jams, things like that? I mean, definitely check for your depth, right? Because you may have to cut the bottoms off of some of these doors.
Yeah, I always like to what's called undercut, and I have this tool that I call my favorite tool in the world, which is an oscillating tool, or a multi-tool, they call it, and it just has a blade that just goes like this, and it works awesome for undercutting those trims. So I always do that. I've seen people, do the square around them, and it just doesn't look as good. So if you undercut them, you can slide that floor right underneath, and it looks nice. It looks like you put the door in afterwards.
We used to have to use those back saws, kind of.
Yep.
Really,
I've used those before. Yep.
Laborious task. Now you just, it just kind of cuts right through it. And
that's absolutely the thing. Since it's so easy now, you really should do it.
All right, let's talk number 3, fixtures and design. So just kind of, what are we talking about with that?
So I guess this goes back to kind of what we touched on with painting is I wouldn't go crazy with again, if it's your house, you do whatever you want. But if you're going to sell the house and you want to have that value, I would not go put a huge gold chandelier in your kitchen. Keep it simple, keep it, the fixtures should fit the theme of the house. And you might have a wild personality and a wild thought of what you think looks good, and that's great. But again, if you're going to sell the house and you want to have that value, go a little more neutral, a little more basic between your plumbing fixtures, your lighting, and that kind of design.
And even with handles and knobs. So, a lot of times when, I'm walking through houses, people have changed the knobs on the doors. The knobs don't match the hinge. Maybe they have brass hinges and they're using bronze, oil rub bronze look on the doorknob. It's an amazing difference, just kind of making things consistent and match throughout. And that's a very easy thing to do. So if you're looking at your old painted hinges, it's very easy to change those out. Just make sure, you're getting the right sizes. And what's your opinion, Matt? I mean, a lot of times in these older houses, and, not saying that you're, suggesting that people do plumbing or lighting on their own, because these can be areas where, you can definitely cause some damage if you mess something up. You break a water line or a water pipe, you don't know where the shutoff is. By the way, that's important. Or, breakers like Matt's talking about, he has a lot more experience of this, dealing with live wires that have been hidden in walls and things like that. So, a lot of times you want to defer to these experts that, that specialize in electrical and plumbing. But as far as lighting, a lot of times I see we go in houses and they have a lamp on a switch at best. And there's no other light in the room. So recessed lighting, things like that. I mean, what's your opinion on that? And, how difficult would that be for a do-it-yourselfer?
Yeah. So I am really glad. Let me backtrack a little bit here. I'm really glad that you brought up the matching hinges and doorknobs, because that is one of my pet peeves. And you're right. It's really easy to fix, get matching hinges and doorknobs. Yeah. The next thing is the dangers with electrical and plumbing. You're 100% right. And I always say in my videos that if you're not comfortable doing the job, then there is no shame in hiring somebody who is a professional. Just because I can work on my own house technically through permits and everything doesn't mean I should. I just have that confidence. And if you don't have the confidence, you should hire someone. I never recommend they do it like me. I show this is how I did it. And so with that said, when I moved into my house, I had no lights in any bedroom. In fact, when I went into my bathroom, I had to open the door. The door swung towards the toilet. I had to walk around the door, close the door, and behind the toilet, there were 2 lights that you would turn on with a switch. That was the only lights in the bathroom. And that drives me nuts. And
you had to turn them, like the knobs on the bottom of the light. Is that, yeah.
Yep. They were hanging on the wall,
right.
And you had to
Sconces.
turn that little knob. Yep. Sconce. And you have to imagine when you go in to show a house and you open that door to the bathroom and you're like, oh, okay, let's look at this. Where's the lights? And then you have to go hunt for the lights behind the thing. It drove me nuts. That was another thing that I fixed pretty quickly. And as far as difficulty of that, if you have an open attic, especially, it's not that difficult. And you can definitely do it without an open attic. But if there's a second floor up there, you're going to have to cut some holes in some drywall and snake some wires up. And but you can draw off of that power, connect a line off of the power that's already there. Or if you want to do it really safe, you can run a new line to your panel. It all depends on the house. If it's old lath and plaster, it might be a little more difficult. If it is, drilling through plates of walls and stuff like that. But there's always a way to do it.
There's just something about downlighting or, ambient lighting that just does a lot more for a room than a lamp shade. So I think, when we look at older houses, I think that's an easy, and if it's not in your wheelhouse to try something like that, like Matt's saying, if it's not as easy to do, that's well worth hiring somebody to do it. And at least making it nicer for yourself or for the next people that are coming along. Now, we're talking about lighting that's already there. Pretty easy to do, right? You have a ground wire, you have a neutral, a hot. I mean, usually pretty simple task, changing out a sconce or a light or something like that. Something easy for people to do.
Yeah, I would say so. It's, you take the old light apart and you basically want to put it back together the same way. Sometimes you just got to pay attention. Sometimes the neutral and the hot are flipped, and there's a reason for that with, might go to a different switch or something like that. But if you put it back together the same way, ground, neutral, hot, should be good. Pretty simple.
And how can they tell whether it's off? So a big thing is, making sure that breaker's off. How can somebody tell? I mean, do you recommend that they buy one of those testers or, just go off the switch if the light seems to be, if you're hit the breaker and the light goes off, is that enough?
If your previous homeowner was nice, they would label the panel, and then, you could go down, shut it off. If you, have a friend up there, your wife or your husband, turn the breaker off, goes off, you're good. But I'm very cautious when it comes to electrical. So I always have that tester because you never know how things are wired.
Very true. And me and electricity, we don't get along. There's two things that I don't touch. One is plumbing. One is plumbing, one is electric. Man, I can tell you, I don't care what it is. If I do a plumbing job, it leaks. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So
that's why they have plumbers.
Thank goodness. And I know a couple of them. So they save me every time. Yeah. All right. So this is a little bit more comprehensive maybe. But you talk about getting in. So step 4 here, your fourth tip is really getting more natural light inside. And I tell you what, nothing sells a house better, in my opinion, than having a lot of natural light or the ability to let it in when you want it. So it's always nice to mask it, when you don't want it. But when you really want to open it up, nothing sells that house better than that natural light. So what do you do? I mean, you buy a house that maybe was, is decades old. And, they have these little tiny windows, but maybe they have brick on the outside or stone or something like that. Maybe it's not easy to put the windows in. How difficult is it for a homeowner to do this type of work themselves?
So yeah, that's a tricky thing because every house is different. I'll say with like my house, it's easy because I have wood siding on the outside that has, wood behind that. And to put a bigger window in, take the drywall off on the inside and make sure you put the proper header in, and then take the old window out, frame in the new one, put that window in, and patch it all up. For my house, I guess it depends. I'm talking from my experience. It is easy, but like you're saying with the brickwork, like I don't know how to do brickwork, so I would have trouble with that. I would have to call somebody that does brickwork, and once if they give me a rundown of, oh yeah, I can just do this, if you do this, yeah, I could work with that. Other ways, I'm on the fence about skylights, because every skylight I know of has leaked in some way,
or will leak. Right.
Yeah. So I love skylights, and I think they're a great feature. But I'm telling you, every single person I talk to about their skylight, they're like, yeah, it's nice, but it leaks. Yeah, it's nice, but in the winter, yeah, it leaks a little bit. Yeah, it leaked last year, so we had to have a roofer come out. And yeah, I have seen these little, I forget what they're called, but they're little tube lights, right? So they have like this dome that goes on the roof, and it has like almost like a pipe that comes down and shoots light into the room. So if you have a room that has like no windows, that might be an option. Actually, my cousin just put one of those in, and he loves it. So no leaks so far. So just adds a little bit more natural light.
Well, you can always get it. So if you can get yourself to the point where these other trades can come in, I mean, if you are pretty handy, I mean, you could do the demo work. I mean, you could take the brick out, certainly take, if your siding is brick, stone's a little bit more difficult because it's irregular in shape. But I know I have taken brick out and expanded and put windows in, and then just had a mason come and put whatever type of lentil that they need, over top of my window on the outside, and then re-brick it. And you can really save a lot of money that way. But how do you really know? The big thing for people is to understand, when we're talking about making sure that structurally it's okay to open up, with a header, or, without a header, or using what's there. I mean, how does somebody know if that wall is what we know is load bearing, where there's a lot of pressure coming down? Can somebody quickly look at their house, look at that wall, and determine whether it's a load bearing wall?
Yeah. So if it's an outside wall, it's going to be load bearing. The gable end might not have as much weight, but you're always going to want to put headers in. And the way you do that is basically, I like to over engineer it, and, I'm going to put a 2x10 by this header, and I'll draw up a plan and bring it to the town here. And I'll say to the building inspector, this is what I'm going to do. And he'll say, yes, that's good. Or no, it needs to be 2x12. That wouldn't happen. But, so yeah, I like to over engineer it. And so for windows, you would always want a header, because it's an outside wall. The inside walls are a little different.
Gotcha. And you made up a great point too. I mean, take a trip down to your local zoning office or permits office, and, kind of ask them, just like Matt said, I mean, they'll tell you, this is required for this size hole, or what have you. The other thing is too, if you are replacing the windows, you have really kind of two choices, right? You could put in new construction windows, which have those little fins that kind of attach the window. And then you could do replacement windows. It is important to know which kind you're going to use, because that's going to help you to determine how wide your opening needs to be and how much repair work you will do, ultimately, at the end. And I know, there are a lot of different types of windows too. I mean, whether you want them to crank out like a casement window, or a double hung window, or some kind of a bow or bay window. So you can look up those as well, because windows can add additional functionality too. They could be an area where you could sit, and read a book. I mean, I know I have one of those windows and have more of a plant shelf, that kind of thing, where if you like to have indoor plants. So a lot of things to consider when you're doing windows, but they definitely help. Guys, everything that we're talking about right now, if done properly, is what we consider a constructive return. What that means is that the money that you invest, you will almost always get back plus profit when you're doing these types of things to your home. They're going to help you sell faster. They're going to help you attract a larger potential buyer pool that actually wants to live in your house. And if you do these things for yourself, you're going to have a much higher quality of home time. You're going to feel good about it. You're going to like it. It's going to brighten it up for you and things like that. So natural light, definitely something that we are always recommending as real estate professionals. Open concept. So you do this a lot, Matt. You go in, you look at a wall, you tear it out, you make more of an open concept. And I know you said people obsessed with rooms back in the old days, didn't they? I mean, it was like, man, how many different rooms? I think they sold their house based on the number of rooms they had, not the amount of square footage that they had. So, what are we doing with that?
Yeah, people loved walls back in the day for some reason. I mean, nowadays it's different with the the engineering that we have now. Between steel beams and LVLs, which are laminated veneer lumber, I think it is, but they're engineered beams, and you can open up. It doesn't matter if it's load bearing or not. You can open up any wall you want, any design that you want, and it is a lot of work, and it's a lot of I guess heavy, like that's intimidating for people, right? But it's not as difficult as you would think. In fact, in this living room, that was one thing. I always say this, as soon as I moved into this house, I knew I was going to do this, but it's true, because I would walk into my either front door or back door, and you come in and there's just a wall separating them. And, it makes it awkward for putting a table. We would bump into the wall, and then, it separated the living room. So we'd have to figure out like where to put the couch and stuff. And just, if you got rid of that wall, like we did, it just opened up a whole bunch of new possibilities. And when you walk into this, it feels bigger, and it just feels more modern, not as closed in, not as, claustrophobic.
Now, what are some of the things that they need to think about before they go rip that wall out? And by the way, for some, you just like that demolition aspect of things, taking the sledgehammer and hitting the wall and knocking it down. It's just something good. It feels good about doing it. You certainly need to be careful. What are some of the considerations that you need to think about before you get out the sledgehammer?
Yeah. So absolutely. I would say number one is permits and plans. And you go to, it depends on where you live. But I will always say, I more, instead of ask them, I come up with my own plans, and I say, this is what I'm going to do. Cool. And then they'll tell me if it's not, so
as a homeowner, you can get away with that. If you're a contractor, they look at you like, come on, man, you know better than this or whatever.
Exactly.
But when there's a certain amount you get away with just walking into the county and going, hey guys, I'm going to do this. And they're like, okay.
and right now you still can work on your own house. I hope it stays that way. I don't see why they would change that besides, the safety concerns, but it's an empowering thing, and I hope it stays. But things to consider are, so if there's a wall that's going down, and maybe you have an open attic, and you can tell that the floor joists or the ceiling joists go this way, that's going to be a load bearing wall. If it goes with the ceiling joists, and better yet, if there's a wall that's in between ceiling joists like this, that's not going to be a load bearing wall. So you could take that wall out. With the load bearing wall, what I did in the living room, the process for that, like I said, it's simpler than you think. You support what's there already. You rip out what was holding that in, and then you put a new support structure. So I built a wall in my dining room. I built a wall in my living room, supported those joists that were sitting on the middle wall. Then you take the middle wall out, and then I hid the beam up in the ceiling so that the ceiling would be completely flat. So you measure the thickness of the engineered beam, and then you cut both the joists right down the middle over to the wall. You support the beam on the inside of the wall over here, and then on the other side, and you drop that beam in, put joist hangers, attach it to the beam, rip those walls out, and you're good. There's that's simple to me. Hopefully I explained it in a way where it sounds simple, because it's really not as, it shouldn't be as scary as people might think.
It's just work, right? I mean, that's
It's
what I
just
tell
work.
people. It's just work. I mean, if you don't mind putting the work in, it may be something that you've never done before, but think about it. I mean, if you actually do it and it works out, you're going to really feel great about it, and you're going to save a ton of money.
And one other thing to keep in mind that I didn't mention is when you support that beam on, you can't just drop it on your floor. You need to go underneath that and support it all the way down to a solid footing. So that the biggest part of the job for this, for me, or the one that I did not look forward to the most, was cutting a hole in my basement and pouring a new footing for that, just because of the dust. Because I hate the dust, and it is dangerous, the silica and all that stuff. So you need to wear a respirator and be careful with that.
Yeah, that's a great point. That supporting, post or column or whatever it is that you decide has to go all the way down through to the basement, through the slab, and on its footer. So yeah, when those load bearing points, that's a great point, because I have seen plenty of times where people try this themselves and they do exactly like you said. They let the floor be the support, for that, load bearing, where they tore that wall out, and you can actually see then the floor starts to dip and it starts to give away and fail. So definitely glad you mentioned that. All right, let's go to the outside. So tip number 6, guys, landscaping, practice your green thumb. Where do people begin? I mean, and Matt, this is such an important thing. I mean, so many people fix up the outside, and I always tell people, I have to kind of tiptoe lightly when I'm talking to sellers, because, it's their house. They've been living there. I mean, you want to be kind. But when you pull up and you're like, whoa, that first, impression that you see when you turn the corner and start making your way up the driveway, it's either oh, wow, this is really nice, or it's, oh my gosh. Right. And then what happens is when people get in the inside, they're really confused. They're trying to put things together, or the outside looks like, trees growing out of the gutters, or overgrown shrubbery, or vines on the house, things like that. And they're looking for things that are other, deferred things that are in the inside of the house that maybe they need to pay attention to. The experience is completely different. So where does somebody start with curb appeal and landscaping?
Well, we can go back to paint, because if you don't have vinyl siding or something like that lasts a long time. When I first moved into my house, I have cedar shake, which are just little, blocks of wood. And it was peeling. It was this really dark brown color. And I had the vision, and I knew this was a fixer-upper. So my case is a little different. But I think, because this sat on the market for a while, and I think a big part of that was the curb appeal. This big brown crusty house, the paint peeling off of it, So think about paint. Think about, that brighter color. Just new fresh paint will make a huge difference. And Another thing, I think the biggest thing, honestly, is the landscaping. You know, the bushes that get out of control. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not big on landscaping myself. I do not really have a green thumb, but it would pay off tenfold to call in a landscaper and say, hey, what do you recommend? I'd like to put some bushes here, maybe tear these ones out if they're overgrown for years and years. I have that situation going on right now. Before I know that if I sell this house, before I move out of here, I'm going to call a friend of mine who knows this stuff. So if you have friends, that's a good thing, and say, hey, give me some curb appeal. How am I going to make this look good? Should I cut this tree down? You know, you want your house. I have 2 huge trees in front of my house, and I'm considering, though they do offer a lot of shade and they're nice. One of them is kind of dying, but they block the entire house. You know, you want people to see your house. You want people to have that wow factor when you pull up. Oh, this is nice, you know? So I think that's a huge thing. I think the landscaping is a huge thing.
Yeah, you know, you said something about tree work. If you guys are going to do tree work, now, you know, I have a lot of construction landscaping experience, 30 years worth. But I can remember early on when I bought my first house, there was a little dogwood tree that was out by the driveway. And I mean, maybe it was 4 inches in diameter, five inches in diameter, something like that, very small. And when you look at these trees, guys, they look tiny, right? But it was probably 15 foot tall. And I had a low electric line that was going into my house and right across my driveway. And I said, I'm going to cut this tree down. And I started cutting it, and it started going the wrong way. It was everything I could do to hold this tree in place, screaming at the top of my lungs. And my neighbor came because I was getting ready to say, you know what, forget it, man. It's going to take my electric line out. I don't even care because I'm profusely sweating at this point, trying to hold this tree from falling. Thank goodness my neighbor heard me screaming, came, helped me push it over. Guys, trees are heavy. Very dangerous work. They are heavy. I mean, you look at it, you go, wow, that little tree, I couldn't even push it over. So, you know, make sure there are things that you're deferring to the professionals. I always say tree work, let a professional come in and do it. Make sure that they're insured. Yeah. But, you know, also with saying that is, you know, they're overhead lines, but they're underground lines too. So, you know, I know Miss Utility, you can call, you can have underground lines marked. I know here in Maryland, I don't know about other parts of the country, but, you know, it's the law, right? Call up, you're going to dig, you know, make sure you know where those underground lines are. But Matt, you don't have a green thumb, but there are things that people can do, right? I mean, you can still do without a green thumb.
I have a neighbor who is an arborist, and she says, you just kind of got to go for it. So I have, you know, the trimmers and stuff, and I do trim the top of the bushes and make them nice, you know, make them kind of even. Cause when it's, you know, because they grow at different rates, you know, you have things growing like this and then things are down here and it just looks terrible. So every now and again I can go out there and keep them looking decent.
I know you're kind, man. You want to build inside, you want to, you know, or outside, you build outside too, but you want to see like this thing that you just did with your hands, you know? I mean, there's not a whole lot of, I just trim the shrub, you know, it's not, it's not as rewarding to some. I get it. Yeah. But, you know, I will tell you a couple things about landscaping because I'm big on it, especially when you're that first impression to me is like the most important thing when you're trying to sell your house. And if you think back when you bought your house, what was your opinion when you pulled up? And a lot of times, guys, you need someone else like your friend to tell you what the outside of your house looks like because you're pulling into it every single day and you're like, la, 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 la. You're not even paying attention to it. You're like Matt that doesn't want to get his trimmers out and trim the shrubs. But, you know, what happens is landscaping can be a great illusion type of, you know, something that you can do to really change the appearance of your house. So I always say, you know, you can make houses almost seem like they turn in place by, you know, bringing bed lines out and you know, anchoring certain plantings, but also sidewalks, patios, things that build ambiance. You know, so when you go outside and, you know, people can visualize, you know, they come home from a hard day's work, they want to go outside, they sit on, they can imagine themselves sitting on the patio, sitting on the deck. So, you know, things that you can do if you're selling, even though you weren't enjoying them while you were living there, consider doing it, because it is a constructive return most of the time on your investment. But like Matt said, when you need the experts, call them in. And, you know, I can't tell you enough, you know, consult with the professionals. Even if you're going to do it yourself, make sure that you're going and watching good YouTube videos like Matt has. You know, visit Matt's channel, subscribe to him, favorite, like the videos, you get more like it. And, you know, make sure you're thinking about everything that's involved in that home project before you start. It's going to make it a lot more enjoyable. And if you're married, it might help keep you that way. Matt, thank you so much, man. This has been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know if you want to do it again sometime. It's great.
Absolutely. And man, any parting words? Last bits of advice?
I think just go for it. You know, do your research. Watch my videos, of course. But you can watch a ton of other videos. If you want to do it, you get such a rewarding feeling for doing it yourself. And there's no shame in calling in an expert, but if you can do it yourself, you can do it. It's, you know, it's just work, like you said.
There you heard it, guys. That is Matt, the Fixer. All of his contact information is in the show notes. Until next time, guys, we'll see you soon.
Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.